We're about to interview Cynthia Wiggins. Cynthia Wiggins is the Chief Operating Officer at Guste Homes in New Orleans. It is a resident management corporation. She is also the president of NORMAC, which is the National Resident Management Organization in the United States. Well, hello, Cynthia Wiggins. How are you?
I'm doing well, and you?
Yes, indeed. One of my sisters in the struggle for public and assisted housing. So glad to be talking to you.
I'm glad to be invited, and I'm
I
proud
know.
of you too.
Vice versa. So the purpose, well, my intent, not purpose, but my intent for this session is to bring resident management back to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you some questions that I know the answers to.
Right.
But we want the general population to hear from the prominent resident management person, Cynthia Wiggins. For folks that don't know, Cynthia is the Chief Operating Officer at Guste Homes Resident Management.
Guste Homes.
I always add that O on it, don't
you always do that.
Guste Homes in New Orleans. And she's also the president of the National Association of Resident Management Corporation, NORMAC, which has a long history in itself. So let's start off with Cyn, about you talking to us about what is NORMAC.
Well, the National Association of Resident Management Corporation was formed for the sole purpose of resident leaders being given the opportunity to manage the public housing complexes where they live. Kimmy Gray, Bertha Gilkey, Irene Johnson, Mildred Haley, Dr. Robertson, Miss Irene, and several other resident leaders formed the corporation through a conversation that they had with Jack Kemp. At that time, there was a lot of violence that was taking place in these communities. There was a lot of deterioration. There was poor management, poor rent collection. And so one of the proposals that they put before him was that if you give us the opportunity to be more engaged and more involved in the way that the communities were being managed, also to give them resources that would allow them to create programs to address some of the criminal element and give people an alternative lifestyle, that they felt that they could turn the communities around. And indeed, that did happen at every last one of those 7 properties where those 7 resident leaders were living at. Out of that movement, there were 350 resident councils that incorporated themselves or moved forward with trying to train for resident management. I will venture to say to date, there's probably 3 of us left. And so all of us were quite successful. All of us did different things in our community, and all of us had different kind of contract arrangements. But for the most part, the program was extremely successful. And it is certainly my sincere desire to see it continue and not die off. Because I think that if in fact it was embraced in a manner that it really should have been, I think that some of the stuff that we continue to see today would have subsided. And I'm always elated to say, out of this movement, for me, the biggest success for me was getting the crime rate under control. And we moved from 9 murders a month to 0 today.
Okay. So how long has NORMAC been in existence?
NORMAC had started in 1974, I want to say. They started that process. They went in, again, they had to introduce the legislation to form the regulations for it. I want to venture to say that it took place in 84.
Yeah, here in Philadelphia, we had 1 resident management corporation and a total of 3 in training. Tony Lewis and Nellie Reynolds brought in Bertha Gilkey,
right,
to come in and to establish resident management, or attempt to do that here in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, the one that actually moved to resident management was Abbotsford.
Mhm.
And along with the leadership, transitioning, so did it. So
Yay.
we have no resident management in Philadelphia. And I like you share the desire to have it reemerge. So what HUD federal regulation for folks that are interested in resident management would you say they need to read up on?
It's the 964.225. That is the regulations to form a resident management corporation. One of the things that I think that is most important, and while it's not written there, I think that a PHA should never support it unless they've been a resident council,
Mhm.
because the resident council undergirds and establishes some of the standards that are actually needed, such that when you form or move forward to becoming a resident management corporation, because once again, you have to incorporate yourselves. The key and the difference to it is that under a resident management corporation, you are responsible for the financial budget of that property. And as such, that leadership that takes on the farming of that corporation, and we recommend that they do perpetual servings as a part of it, primarily because of the funding side of it. That you can continue to comply with having the elections, because the elections of officers remain within those individuals that's a part of the RMC board of directors, but that leadership never transitions out because of the funding. Now, they can be removed for some violations, of course,
Mhm.
but one of the things I know is that HUD is never going to just give groups that are constantly turning over money.
Right.
We always tell people all the time, you can violate the program, but you better not mess with HUD's money, because that's where the rubber gonna meet the road.
I know that's right. So oftentimes as resident organizations, resident councils think about resident management, they approach it as if they don't have to follow the rules.
Right.
964 literally, as we always call it, is the resident Bible.
Mhm.
And you can look to those regulations, whether it's 24 CFR 964, 963, and so on and so on,
Mhm.
to understand and recognize the policy. So one of the unique challenges, and I'm going to ask you, I'm just telling you one of the ones that I've seen, is that folks come in thinking that they don't have to also adhere to the rules, that we hold the housing authority's foot to the fire. So what would you think are some of the unique challenges? Or what would you say, not think?
I think that at the end of the day, we are subject to the housing authority's ACOP. We cannot avoid it. We're subject to federal law. We're subject to the rules that governs a public housing agency. When you technically look at it, the housing authority is only the pass through. The funding comes from HUD to the PHA, and the PHA releases it to you until you can set up direct funding, which is what we're working on here now. We are going to approach this administration for the direct funding, because we believe that all of the other goals that could have been set for us have been set. We have a CPA on board. All of our property managers are certified. Our staff is properly trained, as well as our maintenance staff. So what we've been able to do, we actually performs like a housing authority. The only thing is we don't have an ACC with HUD, which is one of the things that we want to do. But one of the things too, Abe, is our
Well,
part
wait,
in
before I let you go, we throw around all these acronyms. What is ACC?
the annual contribution contract. Every housing authority enters into a ACC with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's how you get your funding. And so we're trying to now wanting to do the very same thing, because we believe that we have now proven ourselves such that we can manage. The next thing for us is to get control of the capital resources that comes to the property to help us address and to maintain the property now that it has been developed. I think that one of the beauties of what happened at Kenilworth was that Kimmy gradually built Kenilworth Park. They did the management side. From the management side, they went into development, and then from development, they started going into home ownership. We want to continue down that same roadmap. And I think that after, I would say 20 years, we're ready for it. The thing is now is to get HUD to sign off on it, because I don't think no housing authority really wants to do that. But I think that in this environment now, I think it's in their best interest to do it.
Mhm. Well, certainly like a location like New York, the
Oh, yeah.
biggest, authority in the country. And you and I both have been getting calls from the leadership there trying to determine how the administration and the leadership, come together, because certainly there's got to be a shared partnership to make sure that it happens, because it doesn't work well in an adverse environment. The housing authority has got to want to, or the residents have got to convince the housing authority that it's in their best interest. Let me
The
put it
other
that
thing
way.
too, Eve, is to piggyback on that. The issue I think that one of the resident councils have got to understand is that they can't always be combative.
Mhm.
That if you want to do this, you've got to come to a step up in order to do it. That you're going to be working with people that you're not particularly fond of. You will be working with people you sometimes definitively know they don't have the best interests of the community at heart. And a lot of them just simply have an expectation for families that live in these environments that they don't even have for themselves. But how
Mhm.
do you navigate that is going to be extremely important. And so I always say to resident leaders, everybody is not built to do this. This isn't for every resident council.
I know that's right. Tell us about your role at Gus Homes. I got it right that time.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I'm a chief executive officer. Actually, we formed Gus. The resident council had been formed in 1974. From there, we in 1998, after following and under the leadership of Yvonne Marrero, who was the first resident management corporation here in New Orleans, I got underneath her leadership. And after watching B.W. Cooper for a while, we made the decision to apply for some technical assistance funds that we got from HUD. We trained for 2 years. And after 2 years, in 2000, we entered into a contract with the Housing Authority for tenant management. But I served initially as the president for the Resident Council, have been on the council board 10 years, and have been sitting now as the president for the RMC for the past 20 years.
Say that again. How many years?
20.
Jesus, you're getting old, girl.
I just tell you I got 9 years left.
So you keep saying, I think the creator has another plan. Okay. So now this pandemic, which has hit everybody.
Yeah.
Tell us how the pandemic has affected you guys down there in New Orleans at Gus.
Let me say this to you. I believe it affects you only in the manner by which you allow it to. After we had Hurricane Katrina, one of the things we kept hearing was the city was closing down, but we knew indirectly there was an agenda to shut public housing down, and that there was opportunity for investors and so forth to take these properties over. We packed up, came home, got our chief of staff at the time was a former police officer. He was able to get us some passes. We came back here in the city, and in coming back here in the city, we set up in a senior building and got to work, turn the property around, and all of our, we were in line and in touch with our residents, went to Houston, passed our flyers, so the tenants tell them to call us. We got trying to get y'all information. Look, we was back up and open within 45 days. Because we understood how important it was that we get tenants back home.
Mm-hmm.
In the midst of this pandemic, one of the things was we went in, we understood what was happening. We made it a point to work toward getting the tenants the masks, making sure we sanitize as much as we possibly could. We shut the operation down for in-house meetings. We went virtual literally on everything we were doing. We were calling our residents, telling them, look, if you don't have email on the way you do business with us, you got to set up an email account. If you don't know how to do it, we're going to call us on the phone. We'll walk you through this process. So we went in and did the necessary things such that we can continue to operate. Some of our staff was impacted, of course, because they had children and they needed to be home. The school system really kind of like messed a whole lot of people up. And we, for a moment, wanted to have our employees' children come to the property and go in a community center. And we were trying to order tablets so all of them could have a tablet. That didn't work out for us because people were just buying them up, and we couldn't get cameras. It was just something that we really couldn't pull off, but a lot of them left and wasn't able to come back, and we're still waiting for that. We've, like so many other companies, are struggling to get staff back or to hire new staff until they can come back. But for the most part, we never missed a beat. I mean, we've been here and open every day. People are still getting their certification. We were able to get the rent adjustments made for those that lost their jobs. We had food coming to the property where the seniors were getting the food. Of course, we had to close the senior building down to no visitors, but only persons could come in was their home health providers. And if it was an emergency, we would let a family member in. We had a designated elevator for those individuals. We put the sanitizer station up. We did everything, the mask requirement, you name it, we did it. But when the vaccine came out, I was on top of that too. We made sure that we networked with one of our local pharmacists. She came to the building, and I think to date we've vaccinated 450 people.
All right.
The majority of them was our seniors. So
that's what residents did.
At all.
That's what residents do. We find a way.
That's what we do. You know, the health authority had to come to us for help. So, you know.
We find a way. What is your long-term vision for resident management?
As I indicated earlier, if more than anything, I think that this thing works. Is how we get our legislators and our local leaders to take a step back and stop putting us in a box. That there are a lot of smart and intelligent people that live in these communities. And that's why it was so important for me when I had the meeting with the people at New York and say to them, look, you want this, all of this we're doing sounds good. It's going to require commitment, dedication, and some sacrifices going to be made. I think that my long-term goal, if I can, in the past 9 years, is to get 2 more of them up and operating, because then it helps to solidify it and hold it together. Because I think that too, one of the things that we've got to do as resident leaders, those of us who are getting up in age now, that we got to be able to pass the baton. And I've talked to some young people about it. Some of them get it, but some of them don't get it. And hopefully one day we'll have, it's my long-term ambition to just get 2 more of them up. And I don't think it's really that difficult. It's just the will of people wanting to do it more than anything, even inside a HUD.
One more question. This is not one of the ones that I initially thought to ask, but knowing your history and your commitment to resident empowerment, was having a discussion with some of our colleagues as we're looking at this national piece that for folks that don't know, you, myself, and Shirley Wise incorporated a few years ago. And that was significant in that in the incorporation, we had resident management, we had public and assisted housing representation, and most importantly, we had Shirley Wise, who was one of the individuals along with Jesse and all them other ones that laid the foundation for 964. So it was important to have those 3 entities, you know, incorporate. So in saying that and talking to some of the colleagues who have shown the renewed interest in a national organization, the question I posed to them was, we were living in times where there were so many things we needed. And I can say and pat us all on the back to say that we fought like hell to make it happen. So as a result of that, a lot of the conditions, good or bad, that exist now became about because we were in the forefront and we were able to take those initial hits and protests and shut her down and so on. And we didn't really buy into the economic part of it. It was always volunteerism. So some of the one of the major challenges that I face here in Philadelphia and others is that young folks got better sense than we do. They don't mind the social activity and so on, but they want to get paid.
Exactly.
You know, we have a bad habit of not creating a environment where we pay our soldiers. So we expect them to work day and night and still pay electric and gas, and that's not possible. So I've challenged a lot of our colleagues of our status to come back with, how do we pull these young folks together and give them the platform to not only do the social aspect, but to let them tell us how they get paid. You have any thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely correct about oftentimes, and I say this to somebody that was running for office about a month ago. They wanted us, she was running for Congress, and you know, they came in, oh, we need volunteers. I was just listening at them. And I said, y'all raise millions of dollars to run for office. You spend most of your money on television, and I get it, and on your literature and all that stuff. But yet you tell people in these communities that they need to work. Well, don't ask me to volunteer. You can't tell me to go to work, and then on the flip side, because it benefits you, that I need to be volunteering. Personally, I take exception to that. Now, you could tell somebody like me that have a job, can I come in and do some volunteer work? But to ask people who are living paycheck to paycheck to do that is very difficult. I think that you're absolutely correct that the programs that we create, oftentimes we are engaged in and involved in, oftentimes benefit other people, and they really don't benefit us. Yes. How do we move to getting programs designed that benefits us? And I think that we've got to make sure that when these programs are designed, that we make sure that we fix it such that we are given the opportunity to work and be involved and get paid. I make no apologies for working and getting paid for the work that I do. I mean, the work that I put into it, what I do, some executive directors don't do. And so for me, I think that we have got to be smart about what we do, how we do it, and we've got to create and invest in our children such that we have conversations with them about how they see money, invest their money, and how they spend their money. And you do that in your neighborhoods with the stores on the corners that's giving us jobs, and stop allowing people just to come in that has no investment back in these communities. I think that we've got to start supporting them. I think where we have young men who have fallen prey to the prison system, came home, that we've got to create opportunity for them. I do some of that over here by me. I got a couple of guys that work here that do unit turnovers for us because we outsource that stuff. We pay them to do that. And I'm not apologizing for doing that. We create partnerships with companies that, like the mini store I told you that we opened here with Rouse, that has created a job for a senior, but it has benefited the corporation. And so we can do some other stuff. For the summer, we're going to hire 10 kids. We're going to do a youth investment program to allow them to teach them about money management and financial responsibilities. We're doing that kind of stuff. I think as a community, we have a responsibility to look within our neighborhoods, see what the need is, and create the programs that bring forward those needs, but also have the people that live in the neighborhood benefit from it, and not let everybody else come in and do that for us. I think that's what we need to be doing.
We have this new administration in Washington. Everybody's hopeful, or, you know, well, to be honest, this administration couldn't do no worse than the last. So let me just come right out the box and just say that. And let me just say that. So already the bar isn't that high. But what are some of the changes you would like to see when it comes to this administration and our new secretary?
I think, you know, we did a lot of eliminating of public housing units, and I think that was dangerous. Dangerous from the point that now we've torn down a lot of it. We've redeveloped a lot but we redevelop in such a way that the people who live in these communities live in their homes. And so they won't have the longevity that the old buildings had. And how do we go in and make the necessary repair work and or maintain them for the long haul, like we did with some of these communities? Based on just what I'm seeing happening here at Gus, that is not going to happen, because we've got to find the capital money needed to continue to maintain them. And that does not exist. Can I turn this air conditioner off? I am freezing. I'm sorry. And so I think that if we don't address that, we're going to find ourselves in here struggling where people are going to live. I think that that's something, I think a conversation that we've got to have with HUD, is that we have all these public housing tax credit units and these market rate units, but all that stuff is benefiting the investors, and PHAs are going to collapse because the money is going out, but nothing is coming in, because you've now dried up all of their capital money and you've dried up their operating funds. How are those agencies going to survive? And I think that HUD, and hopefully they hear us, need to take a step back, because there is going to be a trickling down effect, and even HUD itself at some point is going to be impacted from that, because we don't have a backup to the financial loss that I think PHAs are getting ready to experience. And it's going to happen at the rate that we're going.
You know, a lot of the housing authorities, and certainly the one here, my first interview out the box was with our CEO, Kelvin Jeremiah. And then more recently, we interviewed Rashida Phillips at CLS and talked a lot about RAB, which folks were promoting as the, you know, the be all and for all for addressing capital needs. We were successful to negotiate a 1-for-1 replacement, and that all of the resident rights transition from public housing also went to the RAB properties. So, you know, trying to lessen the negative impacts. However, the land lease is for 25 years.
Right.
And often the folks that invest figure the folks sitting at the table will not be around 25 years from now. So, you know, that's another backdoor avenue
Former takeover.
for former takeover, because if there's no one around 25 years from now asking that the lease gets renewed or fighting for the transition back to public housing, that's another form of potential gentrification.
Yep.
Which we've been talking about continuously since they first came out with Petra. And from there ended up with RAD. So as we end this interview, and it is always a pleasure, my sister, to talk to you, and I'm always in awe of the things that you do. And your commitment to public and assisted housing knows no more better person than you. Certainly always in the trenches. So as we talk about moving forward, we clearly talked about involving the young folks and resident management, which part of my goal, one of my long-term goals, is to ensure that it has a stage. Right. And that folks understand that it does exist, because there are a lot of folks that never heard about resident management, which was the reason why I wanted to interview you, so that folks know that there's some other avenues. And clearly, you know, I believe that with the proper training and support, that we have a bunch of resident organizations that could do this. And hopefully they'll be able to tap into NORMAC. Could you give us a phone number or email address for folks that, you know, are interested in resident management? Could we see what kind of interest is out there maybe?
Well, they can reach me at C Wiggins, WIGGINS @GHRMC.org. Also, they can go to our website, which is www.ghrmc.org, and look at some of the stuff we have posted on our website. I really need to get it upgraded, but I haven't done that yet. And or they can call me at 504-525-9506. NORMAC doesn't have a website up. I just probably just never did it because I didn't think that the interest was there. And so I'm very careful about how I invest money. But I think that if anybody out there that is really interested in doing it, I would like to have a conversation with them about it. Because as I said, indicated earlier, everybody can't do this. There is a level of scrutiny that comes with this, and that they have to be ready for it. And the scrutiny is not just on you, but it's on you and your entire family. And you know, when people want to pick you off, they'll go look at you, try to get that done.
Yeah, Mildred, God rest her soul, is a clear example. They came after her
With
through
everything.
her grandson, her nephew. It was relentless. But you know, she stood and
She stood the
and I
course.
stood the course. Yes, I think the
And she
housing
left on
authority.
her own terms too.
I think the housing authority has taken it back. I'm gonna check to see about that.
Yeah, they did.
They did.
Actually, they turned it over. She turned it over before she passed. Yeah.
Well, it has been a pleasure, my sister.
I thank you.
I look forward because we're working on that meeting with the secretary, not with the trade organizations, but with a group of resident leaders who have been in the trenches, so that HUD can hear from us directly and not through, you know, the trade organizations. But I have no issue with many of them.
Right.
But I think we are the best persons to speak for us.
I agree. I agree. So if you need me for anything, let me know.
You know, you're on speed dial. Love you, girl.
Love you too. Thank you, Eve.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.